Welcome to Mysteries to Die For and this toe tag. I'm TG Wolff and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is normally a podcast where we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. Today is a bonus episode that we call a toe tag. It's the first chapter from a fresh release in the mystery, crime, and thriller genre. Today's featured release is Elephant Safari by Peter Riva. Okay, we've talked before about how many times I don't actually read the first chapter, and this is another one of those times. Elephant Safari is a political thriller, but to get to the thrill part, you have to go through the setup. And if I read you just the first chapter, you won't really get a good taste of what this book is about. So I have selected a passage from the third chapter. The third chapter is titled 4,086 square kilometers and not a hope in sight. And I think this will give you enough of a summary of the setup and see where it's going that you political thriller lovers out there will really get a taste for it. So as far as what's going on, our lead characters, Pero and Mbuno, are following an elephant safari with their photographer Nancy. They stopped for the night and they were approached by a national park ranger, and so it's the following morning when they are waking up at the ranger's house. Okay, let's try that again. I won't ask Jack to edit it out because we all know he won't do that. Pero woke before sunrise, his head doing calculations on where they were. Omo National Park was half the size of Yellowstone National Park. Mago National Park, roughly a quarter of that. Yellowstone had over 700 park rangers, not to mention all the surrounding police forces. These two huge Ethiopian areas of national park had one man for each 300 square kilometers, and that's assuming a 24-hour shift 7 days a week. In reality, it meant each man, on shift rotation, had to cover almost 1,000 square kilometers, 3,861 square miles, larger than greater New York City and the surrounding boroughs. It occurred to Pero that the key to the questioning that he was sure to come from Akili at first light was to find some way to convince him to allow them to champion the Rangers' efforts. Pero searched for a way to convince him that Pero could indeed bring in reinforcements if needed. I wonder if he has a radio that works. As soon as Pero stood, Mbuno, already dressed and ready, carefully woke Nancy. The sun broke the horizon and the layout of the beatty and the carefully maintained grounds came into focus. Taking the 4 steps down from the veranda to the packed earth, Pero saw there was a water trough with fresh water, probably from a well or captured rainfall. Pero, Nancy, and Mbuno washed their faces and said little. Mbuno looked at Pero in the way the two old friends had of communicating without words, and Pero nodded. Mbuno understood Pero had to calculate an angle to avoid trouble. If Akili suspected they had killed poachers, he would call in the police, if he had a way to call anyone. Akili's footsteps on the wooden hall floor of his beti caused them all to turn, look up, and face the entrance. The screened front door opened and Akili emerged, stretching, and said, "Good morning." He was smiling and content to see the trio were awake and waiting for his emergence. "There's a toilet over there," he pointed to his left to a small wooden outhouse. "And I see you have found our water. It is good." He stretched slowly, showing he was at ease, and along with the revolver at his hip, his body language said he was taking control. "When you are ready, I invite you into my home to have breakfast. You like?" Pero said they would and thanked him. Akili went back inside. Okay, side note I forgot to mention. Riva does a really nice job of incorporating some language from the different native languages. I have no chance of pronouncing any of them even remotely accurately. Riva also does a very nice job of providing the English translations, so I'm just going to read you those. It's really better for both of us. Pero checked Mbuno's and Nancy's expressions, seeing that they also understood the one-upsmanship game being played. Pero said, "Ladies first with the restroom," and Nancy started walking. Mbuno read ahead of her, I check first for snakes." He quickly checked the rudimentary outhouse and held the door open for her. "It's clear." Coming back to Pero, he said, "You have a plan?" Pero nodded. "Look around. No other staff visible. Only the one vehicle, and it's in bad shape. He needs help. He needs money. He needs us. We can and will help him as long as he's not part of the poaching. We have to find out. Pero paused. "Until we're sure of him, he must not find out that we're taping the elephant migration." Pero tapped his backpack with his toe. "Another issue. I have papers here from the truck, which we need to review." Mbuno looked concerned. Nancy emerged from the outhouse. "We'll discuss this all later. For now, I need to settle some dust and have some food." The smell of fresh bread baking had reached them. To them both he added, "And probe Akeli's loyalties. Once we know where he stands, we can make our decision together. Agreed?" Mbuno nodded. Nancy immediately agreed, "Yup, pays to be careful." 2 minutes later, the three climbed the steps onto the veranda, opened the screen door, and announced their presence. Akeli called from the back for them to come through. They passed a study on the right and a bedroom with a hammock strung for sleeping. Pero looked up and saw half the ceiling was missing, the rafters covered in cobwebs. Pero could see the millions of holes left by termites. Down the narrow hallway, they found the kitchen. 2 women wearing full-length white cotton dresses, with shawls with embroidered crosses, were laying out plates of fresh sliced mangoes, a wooden chopping board with steaming freshly cut bread, and 3 bowls of cornmeal piping hot. The dresses' crosses were Coptic in origin. Pero sensed that the 2 women were from the north, where the most ancient Christianity was still celebrated, the Coptic Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Akeli invited everyone to sit, including Mbuno, which Pero took as a good sign, and then proceeded to say a Christian prayer before the meal started. The breakfast is traditionally eaten by Coptic households in rotation. First the men eat, and then the women. Pero watched Akeli's expression and that of the 2 women serving as a diplomatic Nancy asked, "May I eat with you?" After a brief discussion, Akeli, dismissing the objections of the 2 women, told Nancy she was welcome. He understood Western customs. Pero knew the ranger's upbringing in Addis Ababa must have been upper class, exposed to more Western ways. Nancy, on the other hand, once again amazed Pero with her understanding of different cultures. Sensing his curiosity, Nancy quickly said, "Remember, I was a missionary in Nigeria. It's the same." Decades ago, her Christian work in Nigeria had given Nancy an understanding few others from America could have. Akeli's 2 women, however, clearly did not approve. Pero asked Akeli if these women were his relations, perhaps a wife. Akeli laughed. He said in his native language, clearly wanting the 2 to understand, "They are my cousins. I am teaching them." He finished chewing a piece of bread. "I did not want them here, but my family insisted. They are not used to modern ways." He turned to the 2 and spoke. They left, and Pero assumed he had told them to leave. The questioning was surely about to begin. Pero wanted to take quick control of the conversation, so he asked, "How may we help you? Clearly, you are undermanned, underfunded, and underappreciated. Anyone who could drive in the pitch black of night, find us without disturbing the elephants that were near us, and then welcome us to the safety of his own home, this is a man operating with a level of experience and excellence who deserves better. So how can we help?" Akeli put his knife and mango down. His eyes narrowed and his brow wrinkled. "Why do you think I need help?" "Need help? No." "Deserve help?" "Yes. We have contacts, resources, and people with budgets. Not for corrupt politician in Addis or Nairobi, but for people in the bush who are capable." Again, Akeli paused. It could be a trap. If he said he needed anything, it could be a political nightmare for him if his bosses in Addis heard he was asking for or getting outside help. If he refused help, these white men could report him anyway. He needed to turn the conversation around, and quickly. "What are you doing in Ethiopia, here in my park?" "We're on safari," Pero said. "Foot safari. We have permits." "Given by who?" Pero looked him in the eye and dropped the bombshell. "Mlizawani," he paused. "Personally." Akeli stood and leaned on the table facing Pero, clearly angry. "That cannot be. Show me now." It was a demand, calling Pero's bluff. The problem was that Pero wasn't bluffing. From his left breast pocket, he pulled a plastic bag surrounding his U.S. passport and a folded letter from the ex-minister of the Interior, Mlizawani, who recently had become prime minister. He handed over the letter to Akeli. Seeing the embossed stationery and signature, Akeli flopped back into his chair, even as he read the words aloud. "I have granted my good friends Pero Baltazar, Nancy Brighton, and Mbuno with uninterrupted pleasure of a walking safari near the Oma River for as long as they like." He stopped reading aloud, but continued to read the Emira commands that insisted to all who should read the letter that they allow and assist Pero Safari in any way possible. Akeli looked defeated. Pero knew there could only be a few reasons that Akeli should feel that way. These foreigners could be here to catch him as part of a poaching ring, or he could be blamed for not stopping the poaching ring. Or maybe it was simply that he was a bad park ranger. No matter how he looked at it, Akeli might feel Pero would tell Minister Zawani that he had to go. Pero decided to press for a response. "Akeli, tell me now, what have you done that has you so very worried?" Akeli was visibly shrinking, hands on thighs, body leaning forward, head bowed. The interrogation was on the other foot, and he felt trapped and lost. Shaking his head back and forth, like a child denying he did anything wrong, he rambled, "I did not know how to stop them. I do not have permission to stop them. I do not have an army help they promised. It is not my fault. I tried." Mbuno asked, "Stop? Stop who?" Akeli's lips were moistened and words tumbled out, spilling everything he knew. "The Somalis who come every year at this time before the rains when the migration brings the animals from Kenya. I have asked for guns, the army, and even police, but no one comes. No one cares. Soon there will be no park to guard. And the Suri, all the tribes around and in the park, none of them respect the park. I tell them it belongs to all Ethiopia, our country. They see it as theirs and that I'm in the way. The APN," he pointed to his shirt's embroidery letters, African Parks Network. He was almost tearful now. "The APN do not help anymore, and they have warned me that they will abandon this park very soon." Pero had read that post-famine situation, coupled with the Eritrea and Somali wars, had split the country into anti-tourism and pro-tourism. Here, then, was the first-hand proof of how the system was breaking down. And there was no doubt that the wildlife, all of it, would get slaughtered for bushmeat and ivory as the two sides collided. People say culture wars have no real effect. Pero knew that assumption was dead wrong, and he was witnessing the proof there at breakfast in this ranger's home and in those elephants Mbuno had rescued. Pero asked Akeli to let the three of them talk in private for a moment. Akeli, feeling powerless, left his kitchen. Quickly, Pero conferred with Mbuno about Akeli. Mbuno, an expert in animal behavior, likened Akeli to the buffalo. He is like the Nyati, very stubborn, wants peace and quiet life. The Nyati is happy grazing, but now must run or fight. Akeli does not know which one yet. Mbuno patted Pero's arm. "You must help him." Nancy agreed. Pero called out for Akeli to come back. "Akeli, may I ask you some more questions?" Akeli, sitting, nodded, his head down. "Good. The two ladies, your cousins, can you get them back home quickly?" Akeli's head came up. He wasn't being reprimanded. It was a relief. He said he could, so Pero asked, "How soon?" "Joshua, my other cousin, works here. He can drive them today." Pero noticed he did not ask why or question Pero's intent. "Good. Now before we do that, I have an important question. How many Somali gangs are in the park or near the park? Do you know? I do not know, Akili said. One came last week with a truck with as many Pakta who had rifles. Only one got out of the truck. Other Somali may have been in the truck. It was getting dark and I could not see. The Somali, he showed me a permit he had for meat. To hunt? From whom? Did you recognize the name? Pero asked. Suddenly, Akeli again looked terrified. Pero recognized the symptoms. When you utter the name of someone way up the corrupt pecking order, it usually meant you were going to be under threat as a risk, and that suspicion could lead to interrogation. And, in a country struggling to find its way through half a century of corruption and violence, interrogation was often permanent and deadly. Pero quickly added, Sorry, it is okay, Akeli. It doesn't matter for now. I get the picture. Leaning forward, eyes focused only on Akeli, Mbuno interjected, saying, Many poko means many poaching teams. Akeli looked at Mbuno. How do you know? Then he shook his head as if to apologize for even asking. Nancy, voicing what was going through Pero and Mbuno's head, said, Here we go again. She sounded resigned yet determined. Pero asked her if she was all right. Nancy nodded, adding, without any self-pity, Fate plays a hell of a strange hand out here. Mbuno patted her arm as a father would. Pero admired Nancy, thinking, remarkably strong, always amazes me. He continued, looking at Akeli. Okay, Akeli, we need your help, and then we'll help you more than you can know. What we've seen and witnessed a day ago will already bring these Somali back to visit you. Akeli leaped to his feet. Yes, already there was poaching, and... Pero paused, looking briefly at Mbuno and Nancy for visual permission. Receiving it, he continued. And a Somali and 2 Pokat will not be returning home. Akeli's head came up, eyes focused on something distant. He appeared resignedly decisive. My cousins will leave. It was clear he understood why their departure was critical now. Somali were known to take women captives for a few days and then discard them to the hyenas. Terror was a choice of weapon for them. My cousins, they are not saved. Yes, that is why Pero said, Can you also leave? Do you have a radio to report a poaching gang? Can you do such a thing? With too many questions to answer, Akeli stumbled into a rambling thought pattern again. I wanted a radio. They said I should have a radio. The director promised I would have one. He sat down, head in his hands. No. God doesn't love me. But I can't leave them alone. Who? Who would you leave alone? Mbuno asked. My men, Akeli said. They keep the tribes from fighting, try and keep the animals safe. He raised his eyes, then said with passion and some pride creeping into his voice, We have 306 species of animals here. I have studied them. They are important. If they go, the park closes. Everything will be lost. I was trained many months. It is my job. He said it with sincerity. Pero explained that he wanted to help Akeli fulfill his mission, his job, but the danger was here, now, already on his doorstep. If Akeli did not want to flee home, if he wanted to stay and fight for the park, Pero, Mbuno, and Nancy could help. But, and Pero stressed this, Akeli had to understand there would be dangers, and he had a right to leave, even taking all 12 of his men with him. Pero exaggerated. We could continue on our foot safari, say nothing to anyone here, and when we get back to our base, in Addis, we tell Prime Minister Melizawani what a great job you are doing and that you need more resources. Akeli looked pleased and started to agree, but Pero cut him off. But Akeli, remember, already one of the Somali and a few of the Pokat attacked a herd, the herd you saw us near, and they killed the leader, took the tusks. About a day's walk from here, downriver, on the west side, there's a flatbed truck with tusks and guns. No sign of the poachers, just papers I retrieved from the truck." "Where are they?" The ranger meant the poachers. He furtively looked around the room as if they would be listening. His body language was close to flight. "Akele, be calm. Assume they are no longer. If they abandon their truck and weapons, they must be gone." Pero's meaning was clear. They were dead. He continued, "But their friends will try and find them and anyone who might know why they disappeared." Pero already surmised that the Somalis, having visited Akele as only the local authority, could now assume he had information of the missing men's whereabouts. The Somali leader would not care if Akele knew or did not. They would presume he did, and if Akele did not have information, he and everyone near him could be silenced. A meat license is not a poaching license. Collecting meat, however legally, meant the origin of the animal must always be concealed. Somali were, in all regards, terrorists, aligned with al-Shabaab, a well-organized deadly force, not to be underestimated. Pero's words landed on Akele with impact. Either Akele had to flee, now, immediately, or stay and fight, and all his team too. His face showed the anxiety over the dilemma he was in. He pulled the revolver from its holster and laid it on the table. "I only have 4 bullets. It was a pathetic admission of how under-equipped he and the APN service were. Mbuno said, "It is a decision you must make." Mbuno was telling Akele that he, and only he, could decide to flee or stay. Perfectly assessed as a Cape buffalo, the man before them looked out left and right, wondering if there was a safe way out. Slowly, Akele realized that there was none. The Somalis knew who he was, where he was, and would come asking, demanding. And because they knew who he was, he had to stay and fight. Akele was educated. He could think, not simply react. He looked from face to face before him, assessing Pero, Nancy, and Mbuno's worth as allies. His evaluation finally presented itself as a hard response. "We fight together. Yes or no?" "Yes," responded Mbuno, slapping his hands on the flat table. He looked at Nancy, who simply pulled her knife from his sheath and also placed it on the table. Mbuno knew Pero already had decided. The brothers have a bond of trust and common morals. Pero placed his hands, palms down, next to Mbuno's. Pero could count the number of situations they were presented with. One poaching gang is stopped. There is at least one other, and perhaps a master, a leader we've not yet seen. Akele nodded. "And if they're taking the meat," Pero said, "there must be a truck with refrigeration. Did you see anything like that?" "Yes," Akele said. "The truck they came in had a metal box on the top it was making noise like a fan." Pero thought, then said, "Could that be a reefer, a refrigeration unit?" "Okay, we need to get help from the villages. The Surrey would not want poachers. Will they help? Will any tribe?" "If their village is attacked," Akele said, "maybe. They are not hunters, not trackers." He held up a fist, raising one finger at a time. "The Mercy are shepherds, Kara fishers, Kwegu farmers, Badi, Mercy, and Surrey have cattle, and the Harmar and their Maiza also have cattle, but they are too far away." He thought for a moment, lowered his now open hand, and then added, "The Nyagatam are fierce fighters, like the Surrey, but they do not care about the park. But the Kwegu? Yes, the Kwegu are also hunters. Maybe they will help protect the wild animals?" It struck Pero as a forlorn hope, accentuated when Akele added, "But they are 3 days away." The sound of an approaching vehicle made Akele jump up and put his revolver back in its holster. A beat-up old Toyota station wagon came to the back door, and 3 men, all with well-worn APN shirts, came up the back steps and entered the kitchen. Seeing the 3 visitors at the table, the first man inside asked Akele, "Who are these people?" The man's tone was nervous. His words came out too quickly to be part of any greeting. Akele responded with a command. "Stay quiet, Joshua. I will tell you soon." Akele then turned to Mbuno, Pero, and Nancy, explaining, "These are my men. This is my cousin Joshua. I told them to be quiet and wait." He paused and then went on. "What should I tell them?" Pero asked the men, "Do any of you speak English or Swahili?" They looked at one another, and the last man to enter said, "Swahili." Mbuno nodded at the man, urging him on. "I am the park ranger." Mbuno asked, "Does the car have much petrol?" The man nodded. Mbuno turned to Pero. "The car is ready. It has gas." Pero motioned for Akele to follow him down the front hall to ask Nancy to follow him as well. As they left the kitchen, they could hear Mbuno raising questions about the roads, the coming rains, and the distance and time to drive to Addis. Pero did not want to assume the men could not understand English. He had no way of knowing if any of the other park employees were in the pay of the shufti. Probably not, he thought, but let's take no chances. He asked Akele, "Are these the men who can take your cousins to Addis?" Akele nodded. "Good," Pero said. "How many other men are nearby? How soon can you raise and get the rest of your men here?" Akele explained that except for these three, the rest of the rangers under his supervision were away west and north where the park is very barren. They were keeping the tribes from fighting and grazing too many cattle. Pero asked if the poachers would go to the other regions of the park, and Akele thought not. They want the migration elephants, that is along the Omo River. Pero thought this logical, as did Nancy. Then Nancy had a suggestion. "Pity we don't have aerial surveillance." Pero knew she was referring to the CIA's capability of satellite and drone lookdown. Pero's old job was rearing its head. Fired by the CIA as he was, Nancy's comment made him wonder if he could extract one more favor from Washington. Suddenly shaking his head to dispel any notion, Pero remembered that there was no way to contact anyone, any way. He said to Nancy, "No radio, no phone. Let's forget that." She added skeptically, "For now." Smiling, she added, "You'll find a way." Pero frowned at her. Turning to Akele, "Do you trust these men to take your cousins to Addis?" Akele said he did, but he asked if the men's wives could go too. Pero felt stupid. Of course they would each have family with them. This was a faraway posting, and family had to accompany the men. Pero agreed with Akele that they should take them all and go. "Now, Akele, do you have pen and paper inside? I need to write a letter for the men to take to Melizawawi. It will be a secret. Can we trust them?" The fact that the Prime Minister would get a letter from a man saying he was at his Betty gave Akele confidence and increased respect for Pero. Using the honorific, he responded, Mr. Aleka Pero, I will make sure that they will do as you say. When do you want them to leave?" After a brief discussion, it was agreed that the men and his cousins and all the wives would bundle their possessions, pack the station wagon, including the roof rack, and leave before noon. Re-entering the Bete, Akele ran ahead. Moments later, Mbuno joined Nancy and Pero. "The men are afraid," he said, "but they will do what Akele is telling them. They know something is very wrong, but they do not ask questions." Mbuno looked at Pero intently. "It is good you send them all away. They know more than they told Akele, their boss. I will tell you later." "Can they be trusted?" Pero had to know. Mbuno shook his head. "They will do as he is telling them, but do not tell secrets to them." Pero was staring down at the piece of paper. He knew he had to give Melizawani instructions no one else would understand. Like many East African leaders, Melizawani had been fully briefed on Pero's previous CIA exploits in Kenya and Tanzania. As part of the Organization of African Unity, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia relied on AFRICOM, the U.S. Central African Command, in their covert actions against terrorism. Pero and Mbuno's heroism was well known to him. It was why he gave permission for the foot safari. Sitting at Akele's ranger's desk, Pero wrote, Prime Minister Zawani, greeting from your good friends at the ranger station in the Oma National Park. I have a favor to ask, one you may want to enjoy as well. Please call this number, 202-654-9999. 0002 and asked Charles, he's sort of my uncle, to have a look down at where we are. There are many interesting animals here, and many interesting people, some, sadly, from the saved tribes we got to know in Kenya a few years ago at a Christian ceremony. It is upsetting that Charles cannot come and join us here to make new acquaintances. I am sure he will tell you how valuable meeting these new acquaintances would be for your work, too. He finished off the letter with warm regards and thanked for all the minister's kind support. He showed it to Nancy. She laughed a little. Charles, come and join us? That's going to make your CIA man Lewis really angry with you. Seeing Pero didn't care, she shrugged as she handed the letter to Mbuno. Mbuno read the letter carefully and added, not just acquaintances, Magaadi acquaintances. This is a word that they can find and no Somali would know. Pero knew the word. It was Swahili for terrorist. Pero added the letters carefully above the line. Then he folded the note and opened the drawer and found an envelope. He addressed it to the minister at Melanek Palace in Addis Ababa. Then he wrote in bold letters, private and urgent. As he tapped the letter on his knuckles, walking back to the kitchen, Pero doubted it would ever get through. All right, there you are. That is an excerpt from Chapter 3 of Elephant Safari by Peter Riva. As you can tell, it's a political thriller. Documentary filmmaker Pero Baltazar, we're starting my review if you hadn't noticed. Documentary filmmaker Pero Baltazar and elite guide Mbuno are on a walking safari when they come across a herd of elephants being terrorized by poachers. After intervening, they take on the responsibility of protecting the herd and ending the poaching, which draws them into an international conspiracy that they could not imagine. Actually, they probably could imagine it. I had trouble imagining it, but they're much more smart than I am. Oh, that was an awesome way to phrase that. They are much smarter than I am. Bottom line, Elephant Safari is for you if you like dramatically intense political thrillers and the exotic environs of East Africa. All right, so let's talk about this book a little bit. So Pero and Mbuno are the lead characters with Nancy, but Nancy is really sort of the plus one. It's really a Pero and Mbuno story. So this is their political thriller, and it takes readers into the... I can't even read what I wrote. This political thriller gives readers insight into the peaceful realm of the elephant and the violent world of ivory poaching. The premise of the story is one of the shining stars for its originality, digestion of modern-day issues, and complexity. The story is essentially told in 3 parts. The lead-in describes the main conflict, and that's where this excerpt is from. It begins with the start of the walking safari by our 3 heroes. The middle, then, is when they accompany the elephants to a point of semi-safety, and then the final segment gets really deep into the political elements that are the key to the resolution. So what I read is sort of one of the bridging pieces where you see it had a nice little backstory of the experience up to that point, and you could easily see how it was setting up for some very major conflict. The characters of Pero, Mbuno, and Nancy, they're likable and easy to cheer for. The side characters come and go, many of whom do not speak English, so they're more task-oriented characters than those that have really lasting roots in the story. And what I mean by that, and you even heard a little bit here, was that Akeli does not always respond himself, but more it's paraphrased by Pero. And so as we get into the Suris and many of the other characters, we have more of that. And so they are important parts of the story, but they don't really take root as minor characters. The setting in East Africa and the elephants were a treat. Riva excels at bringing the sights and sounds to life. I really did appreciate the way he represented the mixing of the languages, despite not being able to share that with you. Rather than shy away from it, he included the various native languages and then instantly provided the translation. It was such a simple way to bring in the texture of a language while maintaining the ease of reading and the meaning for the non-native readers. While it's not overly evident from the story, this is really set sometime in the mid-90s. as it referenced, as you heard, Melizawani as Ethiopia's prime minister. He served the country in that capacity from 1995 until his death in 2012. So it would seem that the story probably takes place somewhere around 1996, 1997. Elephant Safari is a political thriller, and Riva does take his time building us to the breakpoint. Thriller fans, you might find the pacing a little bit slow compared to others in the genre, whereas mystery and suspense lovers, you may feel much more at home. This is definitely a story worth being patient for. The setup is an important part of enjoying the overall thrill. Standing at the end of the story and checking the logic, this is the first time that I have to say, I don't know. As the book moved into the third phase, the true political element, I just was not able to keep up. Most likely, I'm guessing it's because I don't follow the world of politics enough, and especially maybe back in the 1990s in Africa. But as different countries and factions were introduced, oftentimes I could remember hearing a word, like when I ran the pronunciation of Melanzawi, now I can't say it. I'm like, oh, I've heard that word before, or El-Shabaab, I've heard that word before. But I have no understanding of what those words meant and who the people were. I'm very confident that those of you who are political thriller lovers will have a very different experience from me, especially those who like reading the time period of the 1990s, or those of you who lived through it being politically active. This is the fourth story in the Mbuno and Pero series. While reading, I did not feel at a disadvantage for not having read the others. It's clear that Mbuno, and especially Pero, are still recovering from their last adventure, and I thought that was sufficient. But perhaps given the challenge that I had reading the final third of Elephant Safari, perhaps if you tend to have this same type of challenges, I would recommend that you do begin with Murder on Safari, and then continue with the Berlin package, and on to Kidnapped on Safari. I think this might be a step to help you have a better read than starting with this one alone. Overall, though, I really enjoyed Elephant Safari, especially once I got into the middle section, which pretty much started where I introduced you to today. I did find myself continuously thinking about the book when I was away from it, and I was very happy each time I sat down to join the expedition. So the Elephant Safari was released from Open Book Media, Mystery and Thriller, and is promoted by Partners in Crime Tours. I have a link to the Amazon site in the show notes. And let me introduce you to our author, Peter Riva. So Peter has traveled extensively throughout Africa, Asia, and Europe, spending many months spanning 30 years with legendary guides for East African adventurers. He created the Wild Things television series in 1995 and has worked for more than 40 years as a literary agent. Riva writes science fiction and African adventure books, including the Mbuno and Pero thrillers. He lives in Gila, New Mexico. Partners in Crime represents a network of 300-plus bloggers offering tailor-made virtual book tours and marketing options for crime, mystery, and thriller writers from around the world. Founded in 2011, PICT offers services for well-established and best-selling authors, as well as those just starting out their career. PICT prides itself on its tailored packages with a personal touch from tour coordinators. For more information, check out their website, partnersincrimetours, all one word, .com. And then join us next week for our last episode in Season 7, Games People Play. It's an adaptation of 1927 Murder in the Maze by J.J. Connington. I'm still in the process of writing this, and I'll have a title for you by the time you come back to listen. With that, I'll turn it over to Jack to take us out.